if you don't have a copy of the First Nations version of the New Testament, you should get one. You really should. I love it. I really do love it. One of the things I love most about it is how expressive it is and how descriptive it is and how evocative of our relationship with creation and with God. It's just an awesome, awesome thing. And I've mentioned it before, I know, but I do like to mention this every single time that I mention the book, because it's called First Nations, the First Nations version, even though it was done by Americans, because they believe that Canada, using that language of First Nation, is such a great thing because it recognizes not only the firstness, but the nationness of people. So do get it, and it is very definitely worth reading. It's very definitely worth reading through the entire Gospel of Matthew. I'm going to come back to that in just one second. But particularly in this passage, we get names. In fact, here's kind of how we tell this piece of this story. We give the 12 names. You probably also memorize them in Sunday school. There was a rhyme, I think, and everything, so that we'd get to memorize the 12. Do you remember who replaced Judas? It's a test. Because they're named, of course, in the Synoptic Gospels, the three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But in Acts, there's only 11 by then, right? So they elect a new one, and it's... Pardon? Is it Matthias, right? Matthias? Yeah? Wow, people. Read your Bible. It's really important to read the whole story. I'm going to come back to that again. Here's the thing, though. We just do names, but these are very descriptive. You know something about these guys now because you know what their name means, right? So you know something. The only things we know about the disciples are the things we learn because they travel around with Jesus, or they're named in the book of Acts. Or, and this is my favorite bit, we made it up. Right? There's all sorts of great stories about the disciples later in life and the things that they did after Jesus was gone and everything, most of which we made up. Some of them are in the book of Acts, but a lot of them, it's just tradition, right? We've just made up these stories as part of the tradition of those characters. But what we actually learn from them is very little. If only we knew what their names meant, or we could put something to that, right? Because otherwise we know some of them were fishermen, there was a tax collector. Judas was evil, or he was the most faithful disciple. We're not really sure, right? There's different ways of seeing those, but there's way more to them. There's way more to them. And in this little moment that we have here, this little piece of the bigger story, which is how we tell the story, isn't it? Every week we tell a little piece. In fact, we tell, we got a fancy name for it, pericope, right? It means it's a story that has its own idea in the context of a bigger story, right? And so here's one where we take this little piece of story, we've named the disciples, and Jesus sends them out, and he sends them out with very specific instructions. And those very specific instructions go something like this. Go to your own kind, ignore everyone else, and then do all this good stuff, be me. Be me to them. But you don't have to take anything with you, because being me is enough, and being me through you is even better. So just go and be authentically who you are, as I've taught you, and do these things. And if you come to places where you don't think people are worthy, you should ignore them and move on. In fact, just shake it off. And by the way, when you've done all of that, people are going to treat you like crap. They're going to treat you really badly. They're going to drag you in front of the authorities. They're going to beat you up. They're going to it's just going to be horrible. But don't worry, because you'll be able to talk back, because the Spirit will move you to talk. Who's in? It kind of sounds like that. When we tell the story, it kind of sounds like that's what's going on. In fact, I can be honest, not only did I want to use this, I wasn't just inspired to use this version of the story simply because it's awesome. I was also inspired to use it because even in the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition, it includes the part about whether or not you think people are worthy. That's the word, worthy. And if they're not, move on. Go to your own kind, and if you don't think they're worthy, move on. That doesn't sound like Jesus, does it? I mean, if you take this story entirely out of context and don't read it with the lens of Jesus' love, then you could very easily slip into that there are special people, and then there's the rest. And by the way, you get to also judge amongst the special people who's worthy and who's not. It's no wonder they want to treat you badly for that, except it's not that isn't the reason why they want to treat you that way. They want to treat you that way because you're doing the good part. You're healing people and casting out demons and doing all the good stuff that Jesus does. It's the being Jesus part that's going to be problematic. How is that problematic versus the other bit? Wouldn't you think just like ignoring everyone else and only going to your own kind, and that's not my expression, it actually says that in the New Revised Standard Version, Updated Edition, right? So you only go to your own people, and then you decide whether or not they're worthy. That doesn't sound like Jesus, does it? Except, let's put the story back in the context of the bigger story. If you read the whole of the Gospel of Matthew, you'll notice something happens through the Gospel of Matthew. The Gospel of Matthew starts out with the genealogy of Jesus. The part no one reads, right? Because it's a slew of names that most of which you can't pronounce. And it's a whole pile of names, who begat, son of, etc., right? Until it gets to Jesus. But there's a point there, so you should read all the names. There's a point. The point is that the author of Matthew is endeavoring to establish Jesus' Jewishness right off the bat. That genealogy is important. And then we get to this story where, quite clearly, it's only the lost people of Israel who deserve attention. But a couple of chapters after this is that wonderful story about the woman who is not Jewish, who comes to Jesus and asks for his help, and Jesus basically says, "Go away, you're not worth it." And she says, "Yes, I am." And it's that wonderful story where it appears Jesus learns something, which is that God's love is for everyone, not just the chosen people. It's a great story. And then by the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the disciples are being sent out to all nations. From the essential Jewishness of Jesus to everybody. There's a growth through the Gospel of Matthew, I think. There's a growth, and there's a learning. And part of that is this traveling with Jesus, and not just traveling with Jesus as a disciple and learning, but Jesus learning too. And throughout the gospel, things progress through all of this learning to the point where we reach, go to all nations, go to everyone. Make it so that it's like the 8 fires story, right? There's a place at which we'll all be one. There's a place at which that we'll reach. In fact, in the First Nations translation, they use the expression, the good road. It means heaven. The good road is near. It's close by. Yes, it is. Are we getting there? Where are we on the journey of getting there? Not the next life, but this one. Where are we in the journey of bringing heaven here, of traveling the good road right here? Where are we? Are we right at that point at the beginning where we're just all about ourselves? Are we even at this point where we're kind of all about ourselves, but we're kind of working our way through judging everybody else and deciding who we're going to talk to? Or are we at the point where it's for everyone? Not just historically, because historically, man, we've been really good at the we're special and you're not. We've been really good at the judging other people. We've been really good at telling other cultures they shouldn't have that. They should be what we are, just like us. So where are we now? Are we actually at the point where we're starting to listen and we're starting to learn? There's so much to unpack in this story about the story itself, if you just take it as a single story about how Jesus sends. And yes, we can use it as a story to promote how you should go out and share the good news. We could use it as a way of talking about being Jesus in the world. We do that all the time. But what if you just look at it as a step in the journey, a piece of the bigger story? Because that surely should be helpful to us right now. Right? Reconciliation isn't about, okay, we're going to be different now, and then instantly everything has changed and everyone is fine. That's not how it works. It happens over generations. It happens over generations of learning. It happens over generations of taking a step forward and then realizing somebody just stomped on your foot and having to still take another step. So where are we on that journey? Surely an Indigenous Day of Prayer or the National Indigenous Peoples Day, which is on the 21st, is a really good opportunity to just take a moment and think about that. And how we might push ourselves a little bit further along that journey. What can we do about that? In a few moments, we're going to hear a message from the moderator of the United Church who's going to talk about that a little bit. But the thing about this story is that it's very easy, like we so often do, is to just take that one piece of the big story, that one little thing, because it has such a great idea in it, right? And that becomes the story. But where is it in the bigger story? Where are we? Where are we in the bigger story of traveling the good road?